Jesse Eisenberg. I know A Real Pain started off as a completely different story set in Mongolia, but then you saw the ad for Holocaust tours, parentheses, with lunch.
Well,
And
you're good, Joyce.
I
Yeah.
know it cracked the whole story open for you. So, how quickly did the ideas come flooding in and you rewrote the whole thing?
Well, first of all, thank you for asking. Thank you for having me. Well, I'd written a play in 2008 about a guy named David who flies to Poland to stay with his second cousin who's a survivor of the war. In 2014, I wrote a play called The Spoils about this guy named Benji, who's this kind of maladaptive person. So I had these two characters from these plays that I'd written, and I decided to like put them in a room, send them to Mongolia. And as you mentioned, it wasn't working. I saw an ad for Holocaust tours on the internet with lunch, and changed. I took these characters out of that Mongolian uh, um, uh, not working screenplay and put them in on this Polish tour. And then once that happened, once it kind of unlocked, then it just flowed very freely and enjoyably because I knew who these characters were so well, having written them or kind of variations on them in my life. And then the tour of the movie kind of gave me this great superstructure. It allowed me to kind of take this intimate story and then thrust it against the backdrop of something much bigger. And it allowed me to kind of connect themes and connect characters to history in a way that felt more implicit rather than academic.
Yeah, and I love, I mean, when I first heard you talk about that ad, I was like, that just really, like I love like the absurdism and the capitalism of that, of just like tragedy tourism. And
Exactly.
you
Exactly.
done such a great way in the film as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's no great way to tour Holocaust sites. It's not like you should, you know, uh, I don't have a cynicism towards like Holocaust tourism. The funny thing, as you mentioned, there's like an absurdism though to, touring sites of great historical trauma because you still, as a modern person, are trying to maintain the creature comforts. You want to stay in a hotel and, I'll do all the practical things that are required when, doing a tour. But, just the awkwardness of the juxtaposition between, tragedy, tourism, and maintaining a modern middle class lifestyle.
hmm I think A Real Pain is one of the best titles of the year. There's so many layers to it. Obviously, it's like, Benji could just be the pain in the ass.
Right.
But it's also the idea of what you're saying of like pain and how we deal with it and like our access to pain, because obviously Benji wears his emotions on his sleeves and David has dulled his emotions with his medication. And so what was it like writing to find that balance of, highlighting like individual pain against like what you were saying before, the grander horrors of the Holocaust.
Yeah, thank you so much. I guess I was just writing all of the feelings that I have, which is this great ambivalence about my own my own pain, which is to say, like, I have, you know, terrible anxiety, OCD, but I medicate it away and I'm able to live like kind of a functioning life. And when I was thinking about my family's history, and just the kind of the trauma that my family, encountered throughout many generations and up until the Holocaust too, my pain just seemed so insignificant, and that I should shred an ounce of self pity. That I should feel an ounce of self pity for my personal modern middle class struggles just seems, you know, unworthy, invalid. And so the movie is really kind of an attempt at me working through these questions of what pain is valid. My character's pain is so meaningless, on the scale of historical trauma. And Benji, Kieran's character, his pain is much darker and deeper than mine, and yet on the grand scale of mass genocide, it's meaningless as well. And so I was just trying to kind of like pose these questions to the audience without being so explicit or dogmatic. You could take these two characters and just kind of and put them on the background of this, at the forefront of this tour, and all these questions are just implicitly asked in a way that feels like it has a kind of light touch.
Yeah, and there's no judgment on it at all.
Right, of course. No, I exactly. No, I'm just as confused as when I started writing it about, like kind of what pain is valid. Are we allowed to feel pity when our pain can't compare to the pain of others, whether they be the modern suffering of people in war zones or the historical suffering of our ancestors?
Yeah. And David, you have this monologue in there when you explain how you don't feel the need to burden people with your pain and you
Right.
know your pain is not special. And Benji says to him like you've changed, like you used to cry. And does
Yeah.
David realize like this is partly why they've drifted apart?
Yeah, exactly. Like this is, I was just kind of like writing about my life. I used to like, cry about everything, like the way David used to cry about everything. And I now don't. And I sometimes wonder, did I lose something? Am I detached in a way that's actually like more sustainable but less engaged with the world? And so when the character of Benji, is talking to him about it, Benji is somebody who feels everything, and not only does he feel everything, but he makes sure everybody in the room feels whatever feeling he's currently having, and kind of demands that everybody kind of acquiesce to his kind of his whatever his whims are, whether they be excited and engaged or despairing or grief stricken. And so he feels like I have kind of separated from what he felt comfortable with, from what he was able to basically have control over, which was this kid who cried all the time, which was this kid who couldn't hold anything back. And as David has kind of aged out of that emotional immaturity, Benji feels like he's lost him. And for Benji, it's a tragedy that David has become functioning.
Yeah. And I feel like all those comments that he makes about your feet is like his way of trolling you to get you back, you know.
Exactly. Benji needs to figure out a way to control me, and he sees that I'm uncomfortable in my body, so he just grabs a hold of it all the time. He's constantly manhandling me because he knows that's a way to kind of like just it's a little shortcut to breaking me down.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I love about the film is how anticlimactic the ending is, because I feel like as humans, we build up moments in our minds and we expect like catharsis or a release of something. And oftentimes what happens is kind of underwhelming or just not what you expect. And their final destination on this trip is their grandmother's home in Poland, which
Mhm.
I know was your aunt's real home. And they
Right.
get there and it's just like a nondescript home and like they're not weeping or anything, and
Yeah.
they expect to feel more. And what was it just writing, an anticlimactic climax like that? Like,
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out. Yeah, basically, in 2008, I went to Poland with my wife, and I wound up in front of the house that the characters wind up in front of in the movie. And I kind of was expecting to feel some profound cathartic thing, that my life had come full circle, that I could kneel down and put the dirt on my face and feel history alive in my body. And I just didn't. I was just standing in front of this three-story apartment building, and after several minutes, I was just loitering in front of this three-story apartment building. And that disconnect stayed with me for a long time. I couldn't reconcile why I didn't feel anything. And, I just slowly started to occur to me that, well, I don't belong there anymore. History moves on, and there was no place for me there anymore. And what I wanted to do in the movie is to kind of depict the feeling of looking for catharsis and not finding it where you thought you might. And so this movie is trying to balance these two things of telling this very intimate story where the characters have a lot of feeling. I mean, they make each other cry at the drop of a hat. David is crying because he envies Benji and wants so much more for him than Benji wants for himself, and Benji is crying because David is moving away from him, and yet the places they're expecting to find catharsis, like outside the house of their beloved grandmother, is not providing it. And so I was just trying to show that the ways we try to connect to history can be awkward and clumsy and not give us the answers that we're hoping they give us. But the way we connect to other people can give us those answers. And the answers for the characters in this movie is this kind of bittersweet cleavage of their relationship.
yeah, like we can't always try to force a connection with a
Exactly
location
that.
building. Yeah, it's
Yes.
a human connection. Yeah. I love the scene when they're at the concentration camp because I love the way you shot it because it was camera to or face to camera and it felt so simple and it felt like it's a moment that does not need to be like o overly shot and
Yes.
it didn't feel like zhuzhed up and not exploitative. So
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
to like shooting that scene.
Yeah, no, it's exactly what you described. I mean, the goal was just the least ornamental version of style. When I was writing the script and I knew inevitably the characters had to wind up on a tour of a concentration camp, as I neared the scene, just as a writer, I felt worried. There was just something that felt exploitative about setting a scene, and typing out a scene that takes place in a concentration camp. So I think in the script, I even wrote, a note to the reader. There will be no music. These scenes will be very simply shot. The characters will walk in and out of this room. They will walk in and out of that room. We will hear the tour guide explain the name of this room, but nothing else. And basically, I was just trying to just create the most, it's hard to describe, but going on these tours, that's what it does for me. It just kind of like, I'm just in a state of kind of like shock. I'm not experiencing the melodrama in real time. I experience that later. And the power of these places, and the power of these images is more than enough drama than a scene could take. And, it's like the rule in comedy, don't gild the lily or put a hat on a hat. For me, the rule with this was don't make something more dramatic cinematically than the imagery is already conveying. You have the image of a gas chamber, you have the image of a crematorium, pushing in on a character's face is not going to add drama to it. Rather, it will distract from the power that these images should and absolutely do convey.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we have to talk about casting Kieran, who
Sure.
now it's part of the film's lore that he tried to drop out. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
your
yeah.
sister suggested him for Benji, and you had never seen him in anything. So not even Home Alone, or did you not realize that he was in it?
I saw Home Alone. Truth be told, I can't exactly remember. I'm sure it was a incredibly memorable turn, but I don't remember
Polar,
the
go easy on the
specific
Pepsi.
details.
He's a
Yeah,
bad
is that
person.
what it is?
Yes.
Right. So I don't know if that's what stayed with me. I mean, the truth is we did meet, but I didn't remember this. But we met at an audition for this movie Adventureland that I was acting in and that he was auditioning for. And he came into the room and just kind of like blew it out of the water, was grabbing me, like kind of attacking me. The characters like was kind of supposed to attack me, but Kieran was actually manhandling me and kind of aggressive with me and was so funny. And that was in 2009. And I'm writing now this in 2022. And yet I think it stayed in the back of my mind because when my sister suggested Kieran Culkin for this part, the image of him that came to me was this kind of aggressive, charming, blunt, funny, incredibly confident, but also feeling person. And it just seemed like that clicked. That just seemed right for this character. And it's such the movie, it's such an important role in the movie that like it needed the essence of somebody. It needed, it had to be more than just a performance. It had to really be like somebody living in that spirit and giving like the essence of this character so that the character's turns, and there are a million different turns. He's gleeful in one moment and aggrieved the next moment. He's aggressive, but then he's lovable. And it just required like the spirit of somebody. And Kieran just has this unusual, otherworldly charm and spirit and a deep, deep well of emotions.
Yeah, sure. Have you since watched some of his work since making the
Well,
film?
no, now it's hard for me to like watch him because like I think of him as like the
Because of
character from
Benji?
my thing.
Not
I think
you're
of
not
him
even
from
you're never gonna watch Succession?
I'll watch it. I'll watch it. I just have trouble watching things at the height of their popularity
Mhm.
just because
I get it. Yeah.
I don't even know why. I just don't want to be, I guess, I don't know. I guess because I'm in the arts, don't want to feel like I don't know. It's a weird, I'm sure I'm probably not unusual in that regard, but I can't wait to watch Succession.
Oh, definitely not. Well, it was crazy to hear that you guys didn't know each other or that you weren't familiar with his work because I feel like you
Yeah.
guys you work so well together in this film and you guys are were grew up as young actors in New York. It feels like
Yeah.
you should have worked together already. And now
Yeah.
like I just want to see you guys in more things. So when's the next collab?
I really I fell in love with him while we were working on the movie. I just thought like this is just the most exciting actor. And I think I went up to him and said, "Can I like write something for you?" And he went, "Oh, fuck off." Because he's so unpretentious. He's so personally unlike ambitious. And so probably a lot of actors would be like, "Yeah, let's get started. Let's do something." And he was just like, "Oh, fuck off." Because he is just he just is like uninterested in like working unless he really loves something, he's not like eager to go from job to job. But I really just loved him. I had a sense that we would work well together and that we would be a good match. We can speak in a similar style. We have a kind of this New York cultural thing that is similar, and I would be honored, obviously, to work with him again.
Mhm. You need to just write something set in New York so he could be close to his family.
That's exactly. I'll set it in the floor above his apartment so he can go down on lunch breaks.
Yeah. Well, finally, I know your next film is about a musical theater, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What can you say about it?
Well, I will get sued by various parties if I say anything about it, but I think it's going to be leaked or whatever. Or I mean, that sounds weird because if I think it's going to be leaked, then it's maybe not a leak. But I think it was found out and is going to be published soon. But I'm deeply sorry that I can't, talk about it because again of the year in court that'll follow.
You got to convince Kieran to be in it somehow. So,
Yeah, it's so weird. It's like he was just like my favorite. I was sitting there just watching him every day, just enamored. And then you go, as a writer, you go back and you're writing your new thing, and everything seems fresh and new. And but of course, I was like desperately looking for any part that he would be appropriate for.
well, can't wait to see it. Jesse, it was great speaking
Thanks.
with you. Thanks so much for your time, and
Thank you, Joyce. So nice to see you.